It's preparing itself. We know it in okay. Record the clouds. Superb. Turn the sound off that. Okay, let's do this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are around the world. My name is Curtis J. Francois, and you are joining us for the latest episode of the Global Frequency. With me today, I've got the amazing, the gorgeous, the beautiful, and the eternally handsome Tony Comano. How are you, sir? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Trying to figure out how this old tablet works. You have to bear with me. So I am still here. It's just
That's
that I
all right.
can't see anything. There you are. Oh, I can see you now. I can see you now. Yeah.
We're allowed to use the old tech.
Yeah, all good, mate. All good. Ticking along. Yeah.
It's been an interesting week, in terms of everything that's happening around the world. People are still recovering from, I don't know if it was a shock victory, but the victory of he who is known as the Trump, or as my mum calls him, Frump. Um, and it's going to get no less interesting. It may be one of those epochs that we see coming along where everything changes. I remember an old story I used to get told of. Why the Middle East, which used to be the forefront of technology and science, at one point collapsed, and it was because one of the mullahs was anti-maths and decided maths was the work of the devil. Sort
Yep.
of feels like one of those moments in time, and so it's going to be interesting to see how far that goes. We're going to hopefully be joined by another host, the lovely Maxine, who's going to come and join us at some point, I hope, and we'll see how it goes. So, on today's show, what we're going to be discussing is a few issues. One of those, and first of
I'm
those,
helping you.
hello, Maxine, is that you? Maxine, can you hear us?
No, thank you. No, listen.
Hello, Maxine,
Yes,
Curtis to
I'm just
Maxine, are
taking
you
them
there?
out. Are you going to say thank you? Can you hear
Hello,
me? No. Is,
hello,
hello?
Can
hello,
you hear
Maxine,
us?
it's Curtis. Can you
Can you
hear us?
hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you.
I can't. Right, can you? Thank you. Right. Uh,
Hello.
It
I,
was.
s-
Oh,
I
it's so
struggled. Don't
close.
worry. I struggled this today.
I know. Yeah, well, I was a bit late myself. Hello, Maxine. You still there?
I'm just about here. I can hardly hear you. It's really low.
You might. I think turn your volume up a little bit
I've
because I
just
think I
done that.
might.
I've turned it up full.
Oh, are you on a phone?
Yeah.
That might be why. I'll try turn up a little bit, but am I too loud now for
No,
UTC?
you're not loud at all.
You're not loud at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
can't
No.
hear.
might. Can you hear me all right, Tan? Or am I
Yeah,
too
I can hear
loud
you
for you?
fine, but I've got these things on.
Yeah. Have you got headphones you can use, Maxine?
Hold on a sec. Hold on. Bear with me. Sorry.
That's all
That's
right.
all right. Don't worry. Take your time. Mm.
It would be me causing disruption, isn't it?
Well, I was late,
It's
so it's not
it's
just you, is
it's a
it?
global frequency. You're allowed to on this show. It's not like other shows, so don't worry too much about that.
Oh no. No.
What beverage are you doing tonight, TC?
Well, I'm drinking from a Hawke's beer glass,
Mm.
which is a brewery in South London.
Okay.
Well, they sell beers and they have a little bar.
Mm.
Um, but I'm actually drinking BrewDog because it's what they have in the shop up the road. So it's either that
Mm.
or Madrid, and I won't drink Madrid because it's not Spanish. That's why I drink it. It's
If
pretending
it's
to be
not
Spanish. It's not.
Spanish, it's not coming in the house.
Well, no, I don't mind. Beer from anywhere. I'll drink beer from
Mm.
anywhere, but not beer that pretends to be something that's definitely not.
Oh, it's folk Spanish.
Right.
Exactly right, Curtis.
I've got
Sorry,
no
Maxine.
headphones. It's all wireless I've got around here.
Oh,
But I can hear you now because I just have to
yeah.
just put you to my ear.
Okay.
Nice.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Well, welcome to the Global Frequency, Maxine. It's your first time joining us. Thank you for coming on board. I've just taken Tasty through, but I'll take the audience through some of the subjects we're going to be talking about tonight and getting your opinions on. Um, for top of those stories is a new advert that was released by Boots. A lot of people seem to be upset, and they're calling for a boycott of Boots for various reasons, which we'll go into. The second one is the Mike Tyson and Jake
Oh,
Paul fight, or I wouldn't call it a fight. I'd call it like a desperate grunt. Also, we're going to be discussing a little bit about Ukraine, a little bit about the US, the state of the United States at the moment, but from a position of hope, and which celebrity I've been successfully trolling this week. Now, um, you don't have to be an expert on these subjects. It's just to get your opinion and your feel on it, because there is something that you will be able to answer on this. So thank you for joining me. Welcome to the Global Frequency Maxine, your
Thank
first
you.
show.
Thank
And
you.
TC, Maxine TC, it's your first
hello,
Hello.
Maxine. You all right? How you doing?
I'm good.
Thank you for coming on board. So, like I said, we're approaching Christmas, and it feels like a sort of epoch. Like there's something strange going to happen in the next couple of years or so, not just to us as individuals, but to civilization as a whole. I would hope that it was aliens going to turn up, but I just don't think that's going to happen. If anything, I think they're avoiding us out of disgust for our direction. But there you go. But as we approach Christmas, obviously the Christmas adverts come out, and the Christmas adverts have now become another what's the best way to put it? Another battlefield in the war of woke. They've turned it into this I don't know, this thing where it's now a war. I can't get the story up. Let's see if it's got no, no, that's it's gone. But anyway, Boots released a new advert, and a lot of people were very upset about it. It had a black actress in the lead. Does anybody watch what's that show? The period show where they go there's lots of romance. It's on ITV. Is it no?
Bridgerton.
Netflix.
You talking about Bridgerton?
Bridgerton. That's it.
Yes, I have
Maxine,
watched that.
are you a Bridgerton fan?
No.
Okay.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
So Bridgerton, the lead actress, one of the I think she plays called Queen Anne or something. She's in the
Mhm.
advert, and a couple of years ago, all she said was,
Oh, it's not the Queen. It's not the Queen.
yeah,
It's Lady. It's Lady. I can't remember her name, but I know who you're talking about.
Is it and the one that played Anne Boleyn? Was it? Wasn't it?
no.
Wasn't there
She's-
a point? Oh, there was one where one of Henry VIII's wife was black.
No, it's not
I
that one.
think
It's
I know
not
what
that
you're
one.
talking about, but it
It's not
wasn't
that
that one.
Oh, she's
Um,
amazing. She does. I've listened to loads. I listen to quite a lot of audiobooks, and she's an incredible performer. She's also an incredible actress, and I'm going to try and find her name. This lady from Bridgerton. Bridgerton. This is the beauty of doing something on a different device. Uh,
I've got the cast.
she's an incredible actress, and I think she's in her 60s.
Adoja Ando.
Yes, and she's like 60 something.
Yeah.
She's
And
an incredible actress. Yeah.
she basically said a couple of years ago that the royal family looked too pale and too old and too stale. That's all she said.
Yeah.
And this was years ago, though, right?
That's
And
pretty
somebody
accurate,
just
right?
asked her what she thought of the royal family, which is fine. I think you can say stuff like that. But obviously, she's in this Christmas advert, and there's lots of different types of people in it, and people have lost their minds. And some people are really angry. Like people are organizing boycotts, and people are claiming it's an attack on British culture. My question to you guys is, when did adverts become the new, like, I don't know, anytime a black person appears in the advert, especially online, somebody's got something to say. Or like I know people have got issues.
Yes, I think the main issue, sorry, Maxine, I think the main issue is the people that are doing this, and I think it's a minority, it's just to kick up fuss. But I think the people are under the impression that Father Christmas and his wife are Scandinavian, which in fact, St. Nicholas was Turkish, right? So he would have been definitely browner than whiter, right? So this is what people don't see. St. Nicholas was, or Santa Claus, Nicholas, that's what the Germans called him, but he was Turkish, so he'd have been of a dark hue anyway. And his wife, if he was married, let's hope he was, If he was married, would have probably been a lady from Turkey or northern Greece. So I don't get it.
I
I
personally think is when you're trying to push diversity or alternative lifestyles on people, it gets painted that everybody is all in. And a lot of things get pushed down people's throats and they don't like it. Now, for some reason, when it comes to Black folk, it's like they're never ready to accept. They accept certain things, but there's certain things they won't accept. And it's just going to be an uphill fight because
do you think it's
Boots.
gotten? Do you think it's gotten worse than it used to
No,
be?
it's never gotten worse. It's always been there. It's just that due to technology, social media is out in the open because most of these things are undercover.
Mm.
It's always been there. It's just, like for instance, because of all the restrictions and laws, it's hidden in plain sight. So they do it a different way.
Mm.
So you might be in a room full of people, you might be working with a load of people,
Yeah.
and they're all sign up to diversity, treating people how they want to be treated, regardless of genders and all that. Remember, it's all a part of getting that job.
Right.
But like you said, I can smile and talk to you, don't mean I like you.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot
Story
of
my
people
life.
that smile and talk and do the right thing, but they don't like you because they've got their bills to pay. So they would tolerate what they wouldn't normally tolerate. That's why what happens is, if you notice, when they had the riots a couple months ago, with
The
the
Farage riots.
sorry,
The
the
Farage riots.
what
Because of
riots?
the little girl that was killed, the little girls that were
Yeah,
killed at
right.
the, yeah.
You began, even MPs. You see, they're all showing their real true colours.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, it's because they're not genuine about how they feel, because they can't show it because you need the votes and because of the job you're doing. But sometimes that mask slips, and this is what you get.
And do you think there's a way of bringing people round? Like,
Mm,
because the language is the language at the
It's
moment is
it's
so
it's
polarized.
ingrained. You got to remember, some of these people, it's been taught to them from young.
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
where I worked before, I remember there was this guy, young guy, and basically he had a thing about Black people. And I spoke to him. I said to him, "What is your issue?" He said, "Oh, they come over here, they take our women, and they take our jobs." And I don't know, back in the 80s, they had this thing about basically all Black people like mugging old women.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Right
Sundays,
now,
yeah.
you've got to remember, like back in like the 40s, 50s, when you're growing up, remember, you're not born racist. You're not born. It's something that's indoctrinated into you.
Mm.
So, and because when I actually sat and spoke to him, when I asked him, well, what is your actual reason of not having, you've got an issue with Black people? He said, oh, because one of them mugged his granddad. So I said, okay, that's one. All of us didn't do it.
Mm.
And he's like, yeah, but, and that was, the ironic thing about it, that was the time apartheid in South Africa was rampant. And I then said to him, you want us to go back to our own country, so you say, but look what you're doing in South Africa. Is that an extension? So you see the hypocrisy of it all, do as I say, not as I do.
But there's got to be hope, hasn't there? There's got to be a way forward, like around it. Like you had a talk with him. Did he change his views at all?
Remember, he would change his views, but when you get among your people or certain people, you revert back to form.
Mm.
Because it's if you've got to be in an environment where it's taught and it's upheld. If it's not upheld, what's the difference does it make?
But saying that, then, do you read, like, especially with adverts and stuff? Because obviously the younger generation, younger people tend to have stepped away from that a lot more and be a lot more open to different things, right? Does that mean, like, in terms of adverts, does that mean
you
that
got to understand, right? A lot of these things, right? Do not be misled that they don't know, because remember, it brings notoriety, it attracts all, because some of these things they do it deliberately, knowing the outcome, and it puts the brand up there.
Yeah.
and what they're saying is, at the end of the day, the fight would be, oh, Boots is not racist, though. But look, we're not racist. It's you lot. And it creates that culture around it that will push up its profit. Because remember, at the end of the day, negativity sells. You know, and if you can cause some kind of diversion or make something happen and everyone's distracted by what goes on, because remember, while we're distracted over what's going on with Boots, what's going on over the other side?
I'm sorry, Maxine, that is too cynical.
No, but it's true, because sometimes people do things to distract you from
hear you,
Yeah,
but
look at this
Boots.
hand. Look at this
I
hand.
get
What's
you,
this
but
one
I'd
under the
say
desk doing?
Yeah,
it's
because you
Boots.
know, like for instance, because our concentration don't last long.
Yeah.
So as you know,
Oh,
it's
God.
not just the other day we had the right because that girl got killed. Look how quick we've moved on to something else. Then everyone's fighting over Trump. So all they have to do is put a distraction. So we're like, oh, Boots, and then the next thing you find, your poll tax gone up.
Isn't it like, not being fun, but isn't it a bit Orwellian? Like, you know, it's like the daily hate. So as in like the hour of hate they used to have in 1984, where almost now it's come to the stage where it's Christmas. Obviously, everyone's going to put out a diverse picture because Britain is diverse. You know, we're not just one. We're not homogenous, but that's hence why we've got an amazing culture, right? So we're not homogenous. Every company's going to, and it's almost like, right, the world's gone mad. Let's get angry about it. It's almost like they just want old people. Do you know what? If my old man,
I get that. I get that with the press, and I agree with both of you on that. The press is very manipulative like that. But day to day, I don't think people are. Like, if you're constantly that angry, like that,
you're going to do something stupid.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? But just how do you survive? Do you know what I mean? It's like, how do you get out in the morning if your stomach's that cramped?
I might be wrong. But from my point of view, but I know I'm of an older generation. I don't know about the younger lot. The older generations couldn't give a shit, and not in an awful way. It's just an advert. It's another Christmas advert. Oh my god, we're still in November. Are you having a laugh? Do you know what I mean? That's for me.
It is still November.
And if you take it in another content, right now, Christmas is a big struggle. If you're into that, it's a big struggle for people because most of the time they don't even know if they can put food on the table, let alone worrying about who's in an advert. But sometimes what it is to do. It's like, you remember, was it a couple of weeks ago they were kicking off about Charlie Boy and Williams and how much they earn and what they do to us, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? All these distractions came to distract us from that.
Daily Mail didn't make a big fuss about that.
Okay,
but
right? They're charging National Health for parking their ambulances and all that, and they did everything to get that swiped out the news.
Yeah,
right. So it's people got to wake up and stop being easily distracted because we're just like, over here, no, over there, no, come over here, no, run over here.
Which is what the global frequency is here for. We're here to get people back on track. In terms of that, though, so we've got a situation where the press is trying to distract people a lot, and nobody's, like you rightfully said, nobody is talking about. Even I didn't think to remember that, but nobody's talking about the royal family and the way they get money. Even though, from what I hear, it was like a 3-month investigation.
No, it's longer than that. I think it's like 2 years or longer.
It was like a long investigation of all of their finances and the money they have. And this was also
no
at the
tax
same
they
time
pay.
when Prince William was talking about homelessness, which again,
and they're the worst slum landlords. Look what they're doing.
Yeah, they are.
And that's the thing. How do you is it possible? Was it ever better than this in terms of what the press were doing? Because I certainly can't remember the press being as polarizing as it was. Maybe in the 80s, they were this polarizing, and what does it look like when it's better? Is more the question I need to ask.
The thing you got to understand, as long as you got big business, big money, because remember, at the end of the day, if at the end of the day I want to humiliate you and it's making me money, unfortunate for you, my friend. Right? Because we're so invested in, because the world is all, because back in the 80s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, being a millionaire, everybody was quite satisfied with that. And when it all changed was in the early 80s when Thatcher took away all the credit restrictions of everything. And you remember on the news, they used to always come, the bank quarterly profits. And it was a race to the top. We've made 80 million. And people were happy with the million. What the problem is now, everyone wants the billions. And then once there's enough billions, we're going to want to go trillions.
Which they're looking at now.
And this is what I'm just saying to you. And it was never like that. You used to hear banks make 850 million. That was a lot of money. But now because they're never going to be happy. They keep pushing it. What is in the question you've got to ask yourself? When's enough enough?
I think Elon Musk may prove that to us soon.
And this is where it's all gone. Nobody's satisfied with what they've got. If I find out that you've got a 10-bedroom house, I want to have a 15-bedroom house.
I'd settle for 5.
Yeah, it's like the old saying from when I grew up. If I've been to Tenerife, you've been to 11 Reef. Just keep going up and up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
Do you think? Okay, let me ask you this question then before we move on. Do you think people would be happy? Do you think there's an answer to it all? And 2, do you think people would be happy if it wasn't? So if we got rid of, not necessarily, I don't know, if there was a way of treating people equally,
we would be much happier if you didn't have social media, right? Because that in itself is a big flex for a lot of people, and putting out falsifying your image to people. Because when back in the days, right, people was kind of more satisfied. You had a community. It's like now, when I was growing up, you knew more or less all your neighbors down the road. Right, and you might say, Mrs. Johnson, she's 70. Knock and see if she wants to get a pint of milk. Now we come into the 80s and it's turned in like, is it Wall Street? Greed is good.
Yeah,
but I disagree with you on one point. I think people weren't happy, which is why that greed is good worked so well.
Because the thing about it is, at the end of the day, we were grown up on community. You knew your neighbours, even if they weren't your cup of tea, but you knew. Right?
Yeah, but the first opportunity they were given, they left, they moved.
What I'm trying to say to you is now you could be living, you've got your house, and next door to me, they're living there. Somebody could buy a buy-to-let. So you've got no community because you don't know because that person who bought that place has bought it to let. They don't care who they put in there as long as they're making their money.
Right. And they're gone. That's right.
And that's where there's no community, because there's no point getting to know them because you don't know how long their
turnover's quick.
Right. And the thing about if they've put in a right bunch of wrong uns in there, you're the one that's got to live with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and because it's all this buy-to-let and nepotism and my friend, that's why it's all gone belly up.
Do you know, Maxine, when my old man grew up in northern Spain in a tiny, really sleepy little village, right? And I said to him, was there crime? Because I grew up in like the 80s and the 90s. And he said, I said, was there crime and stuff and people stealing stuff? He goes, there was nothing to steal. We were all poor. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing to steal, and everybody got on with each other and helped each other.
There
was nothing. But that's the community of, you're all in it together. We don't have that now. We're not all in it together. We're all against each other.
It's like a Remembrance Sunday. I'll be honest with you, I didn't remember. Because most of the time, when did you see anybody selling poppies? Did you see anybody?
No, I had to go to North London to find someone selling poppies because I couldn't find, and I live in Hampshire now, and I couldn't find anyone around here. But then I'm driving to work, going to work, coming back, you don't get out.
I think it's because a lot of people buy their poppies online now. It's not even like
what
they just buy them online.
And how many did you see people wearing them?
I saw quite a few people wearing them. Because people that were wearing them have either 2 ways of wearing them, either very prominently, or they'll put them like they'll be doing something and they'll just show it when they're
So the question now is, what happens when the remainder veterans of the war, because every time you see it, there's getting less and less of them.
Yeah, of course, God, yeah.
So
crikey.
what's going to happen when there's none of them?
It becomes performative, which is the whole point of
It
where
becomes
people like
symbolism.
Farage and all the rest are going. It then becomes performative, and then it'll be like you're not British or you're not loyal if you're not doing it, which is where it's been building. It never used to be like that. When I was younger, and I think that's the one big difference I've noticed growing up. That yes, people did remembrance, but you didn't have to. People wore poppies, but you didn't have to. And now it's becoming like if you don't wear a poppy, you're not.
No, I didn't find it. I did nobody. I don't see nobody mentioning. If it's not on the news in your face, you don't know. Just like you remember Harvest Festival.
Yeah.
When do you ever? And you were told, oh, you had to bring in like a tin of beans and all that to school and all that. When do you hear about that?
Don't, unless
They
you've got
don't
kids at
anymore,
school.
do they?
No, you do if you've got kids at school.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and remember that was a prominent thing. You'd go to church, Harvest Festival, and you
All
bring.
things
And do you remember that you'd have
Brighton,
all
yeah.
that, all the people bring their tin of beans, their pasta, and
Yeah.
that, and that was given out to the poor or people that need it.
Mm.
But now that's sort of converted into food bank, and they've now made the food bank an acceptable thing. Rather than
is it?
it's not acceptable,
Oh,
but they've
no,
made
no,
it
no.
acceptable.
Yeah, it's standard life now, isn't it? Food banks are just part of standard life.
Oh
You
yeah,
can't
look,
afford-
I'll always say this, right? No, the problem with in my point of view, the biggest problem with the UK is that nobody's seen en masse serious poverty for at least like 3-4 decades. And like not since the like 70s, 60s. Like I remember there still being slum houses around in the 80s and stuff. And there's still sort of quite a bit of slum housing around London, which if you know where to look, you can find it. But I think people haven't seen it for a long time, so they don't think it's their problem. And even with food banks, a lot of people who maybe even aren't rich don't think food banks are necessarily their problem as well.
I find
Um,
that food banks,
mm,
right, isn't it? They think it's a solution to, because after these things, the reason why you've got homelessness in the first place is because Thatcher sold off all the council homes and people got greedy. And a lot of the people that are now homeless, so you'll find out, is because they were in the public sector renting and the landlords kicked them out or because they couldn't pay the rent. And this is what it leads to. Even though when they sold off the council houses, the agreement was that they would take the money made from the council houses and build more.
it's partly that, but I think it's partly more. It's that, but also I think there's a problem that we haven't just not built homes in the UK, especially in places like London and all the rest of it. But so much of the housing stock is old and not very usable. And by that I mean, yes, they've built lots of luxury flats and all the rest of it. But if you walk like where I live in Fulham, most of the housing stock outside of the new builds are buildings that were built pre-war and just the post-war housing. They're not built for modern living. They're very small. They were made for people who maybe had one kid. They're not accessible if you've got wheelchairs or you're disabled. You can't use this housing. And it's huge swathes of London like that. And what they actually needed to do wasn't just building new homes, luxury homes. It was one, not building more social housing, but two, not looking at the not long-term planning. There's no long-term planning for housing in the UK.
No.
Never has been. And that's where the core of the problem is. They left it to the free market, and the free market don't care. And the free market will just build whatever it can for the highest sell price with the lowest amount of quality they could put into it.
Highest
I
profit.
spoke to a guy who was from Australia once, guys, and he said, you're like, he was a plumber, and he said, your plumbing systems are about 20 years behind us in Australia. Because we're just, there's no forward planning for housing because, and I'll always say this, so many MPs are landlords. So many MPs make profit out of the housing problems that we have on both sides of the pie, but mostly the Tories. That nobody sat down and gone, actually, we need to talk, we need to have the level of planning we had after World War II, and go, this whole section needs to be rebuilt. This whole section needs to be rebuilt, and we need this much social housing, and not the type of social housing that they built post-war, which was stuff that was, personally, I don't think it was good enough. I'm talking about what they've managed to do on the continent, where you've got proper social housing, where they've got facilities, whether it's swimming pools or social clubs or whatever they've got. And that's what needs to happen. But until that sort of forward planning happens, this is just going to carry on.
I think personally, even you've got to understand the people you're dealing with. And when I say the people you're dealing with, right, sometimes you could put your swimming pool in, you can put your youth centres in, right? But if you don't put people that appreciates what, because remember, your area is only as good as the people that lives in it. And
I agree, but I disagree with that.
And because you got to understand is if I decide years ago when they built council properties, remember that generation in the 50s used to have pride. They would sweep outside their doors, and they used to have. I remember they used to have a piece of paper on the wall where each flat and all that take their turn to mop the stairs. Rota. They used to sweep and mop the stairs. They used to take pride in their places.
They did.
But as time went on, people, the next generation took it for granted. Well, why should I clean it? The council should do it. Why should I do this? The council should do it. And it just goes, and it just went downhill. And
I don't think that's what happened. Like, I don't think it was just because of that. I think the money went, especially if you look what happened from when the right to buy happened, because then a lot of people sold their flats off, and they left London. They moved out to the suburbs, so Surbiton, all those areas, they left. And the money went with them. And it wasn't just, when I say the money went with them, when I was growing up, and TC, you can attest to this, you had Fulham pools, you had all the youth clubs, you had all of that going on in Fulham. You had the Rec, where kids could go play. You had the social clubs for older people. And there was a social club on the actual estate, where people could go and drink and party or whatever, right? The moment by the time the 80s was over, maybe mid-90s, all of that was gone.
Well, I can tell you that in the early 90s, on our estate, West Kent estate, which was it had, I think, in the region, it still has, obviously 3,500 homes or something like that. So that's homes, not people living there, but 3,500 homes. When we started, like in the early 90s, it had something like 20 odd caretakers. By the time I left, they had one caretaker on 3 different council estates. So he was working 3 different council estates, one caretaker. So, and West Kent by itself had 3,500 homes. And in that team, they had carpenters, plumbers, builders, decorators in that team. And that all disappeared as soon as, like, literally within a 10, 20 year period, that all disappeared, and they put it out to subcontract. So it's one caretaker on 3 council estates, which must have been roughly the same size as West Kent, which is impossible. So inevitably, it's that old stratagem, isn't it? If you want to make people unhappy, you want to make them unhappy with the service, you defund the service, and then you tell them that privatization is going to be better, and inevitably, it never is.
But you see, the problem as well is that we are to blame as well, because you got to understand. When the right to buy came in, a lot of people did well out of it.
Jumped on it.
Yeah.
And then what they did, they then, because you might have started on a council estate, then you started to get up yourself. And you thought to yourself, well, it's not my problem anymore. Not knowing that one day, as it's come now, that we're in a position now where it's everybody's problem, because we all go to the shops, we all got to eat, and the prices affects everybody. Right? Even people that make good money, like people that are on 100,000, are complaining. So and it all stems from greed. Because once I'm all right, Jack, you're not going to stop to think that
I totally agree with you.
Right.
But all I'd add, and what I had to add, is that greed wasn't something that the people on the estates, I believe, had. What happened was that all that money went. But people didn't know what was going on. Like, the council would turn around and go, well, we have to close down this playfield for health and safety. And especially most people didn't question it because it was like, oh, right, okay.
Because
I don't want
you
my, I
used
don't
to
want my
trust
kids
in the
injured.
council.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
'cause you
don't
used to
want my
trust in
kids
them.
injured. They didn't realize what a lot of these councillors were doing.
Well,
Whether it was Labour or Conservative didn't matter.
well, you remember they were taking our money and sending it
Yeah.
to Iceland. You remember when they got caught when the run on the banks happened,
Yes,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
took most of the money, your poll tax money that they forced you to pay, and they were
Oh, yeah.
investing it in Iceland.
Yeah,
A lot
I
of it was all because Iceland was hit by the banking
Yeah.
crisis,
Yeah,
and
I
you're
fucked
like,
out of it.
why could you take our money and put it in Iceland?
know quite a few councillors were hit by that. I remember that. God, Maxine, can I just say you're a brilliant source of information? Because I completely
Yeah, because do you remember? Because a lot of them,
No, I remember that now.
and you
Yeah,
remember
no.
a lot of the councillors and that were
Mm.
in the pockets of the developers, and they're selling off land
Still are.
cheap, and
Yeah.
and then they've made a deal with the council that they'll build these properties, and 10% of them properties would go back to the council.
Yeah.
And then the 10% got capped to 5%.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that always happened, and I don't think there's been any building projects, especially in Fulham, that I know, apart from the one new build that happened, which was on
Right.
Star
I'm
Road.
going to come to you about your building your properties in Fulham and places like that. Fulham, Chelsea, Mayfair, Kensington, all round there.
Yep.
You've got to understand this, and this is what I try to explain to people. Remember, if you look at the King Charles, he's a landowner.
Yeah.
If you look at Balmoral and Windsor, look at the land around all that. Look at the land, what they own. And if you think they're going to let you come into Mayfair, Kensington, Chelsea, Sloane Square, and put up new housing or council housing on their land, you are gravely mistaken. They're not having all that round by them. They don't mind squeezing it beside the likes of me and you, but they're not putting it there.
I don't think they're going to have a choice thing. I really
they
don't.
do have a choice, because remember, they own the land. Remember, Westminster's owned by the Duke of, is it Westminster?
It is Westminster, yeah.
Yeah,
Westminster,
so remember, he has a say. King Charles, how much land does he own? They say when, where, and what goes there.
No, I hate to a degree that it's very, very true. But I think, especially in areas like Fulham and South Kent,
unless it's an impoverished, rundown part of it, where they don't mind if you open your door and you walk into someone else's flat. They don't care. But it's not going to happen to them.
Yeah, I can't disagree.
Look, because if you look at their country retreat, you think they're going to let their greenbelt land, that they're going to allow your sort coming on to their, no way.
They should be paying me to go onto their land. All right, no, I hear you. I hear you. I think, look, we'll see what happens. I think there has to be some fundamental change, because things just can't go in the way they go.
The only fundamental change you have to do is that if you've got to remember that England on the whole is an island, and it's only so much people it can take. Now, if we carry on allowing more and more people coming, because the more people you have, you will not have enough resources, and the resources become tight, the space become tight among ourselves. I'm not saying there's not enough space, but if you've got one man who wants to own, a 100,000 acre of land, then you've got another one that owns 100,000 acre of land. Where we live is going to become tight.
Well, I'm maxing the stat. I think the stat is something ridiculous, like 95% of the land on the British Isles is owned by 1% of the population. I think it's even less than 1% of the population.
Okay.
It's ridiculous.
So you imagine one person or two people or whatever, they got that vast amount of land, and there's me and you literally squashed up against each other. Or we just on what they do, they give you a stamp.
Well, I think that's where the new law on the whole what is it, the new law on farmland and stuff like that, and
taxation. So basically,
yes,
multi-billionaires can't avoid
dealing with that,
paying tax because they get tax breaks if they have farms, and it's to avoid them paying that.
And
well, you
also,
remember
Yeah.
Remember councils? You remember normal council houses where they used to have a in-law a standard size, and then they got rid of it.
Yes.
Because remember, because if you look at the old 1950
Yeah, they're
tower
massive.
blocks, look at this. Have you
The
been in
rooms are
some of
massive.
them?
Yeah, I used to live in one.
Okay. Now when you look at the old Victorian ones or the new builds, look
Yeah,
at them.
tiny box rooms.
Right, because I remember my friend who had one. Her living room, you could get a full dining table in there, and there was still room for
Yeah.
a three-piece settee.
Yeah. Massive rooms.
They were just massive, and the bedroom was a proper double bed. You got in there, not what they're selling now.
But that
Now
was the whole
you can
idea
get a
back
double
then,
bed in
wasn't
it.
it?
That's how they sell it. If you
That
can
was the
physically
whole
get a
idea.
double bed in it, that's how they sell it. That's a double bedroom, and it's not. So you can get single in there if you're lucky, and a tiny wardrobe.
And again,
And
that's something that the government and local councils need to be held responsible for. Because if you want to know why so many people who live in council housing nowadays are suffering from bad health conditions and all these types of things, is because of these types of things where they're being shoved into spaces too small for them to exist in. And I don't get it. I don't like. If I can see a mile off that this is going to cause problems, why do they pretend? And you have to pretend that doing that to people is appropriate.
The reason why I don't say because they've lost the grip on the regulations on it all. Because remember, you could be in a block of flats and you now don't know what is private, what is council. Now, if it's privately owned, they could do what they like because that legislate.
No, they can't. I only say this because I know because I used to have leasehold, and you can't. If you've got leasehold, you've got to be really careful what you can do with the property because if you sell the property on, as long as you're within the leasehold, so it's one of those ones where you've got to be careful. But if you sell it, we sold our property back to the council, and they ripped everything out of it. So you do have to. It's like it's trickier than you think it is. Like you can't just start putting up.
Would you have a problem with how much people you rent it to?
Personally,
yeah,
I would because it would have been a family flat, but a family for like maybe at most 4, do you know? At most 4, and that's 2 bedrooms. But obviously you got like mum and dad, and then you got 2 siblings, but they'd have to be like of the same sex, you know, and that's the maximum you'd have in there.
But there's people that don't do that. They will.
No, I get that. I get that, but that's not I mean,
guys,
I want
to move us on because we don't have much time. But I want to get your views on a few other subjects of things that have happened over the past couple of weeks. Just because one, it's Maxine's first show, I don't want the audience to get a taste of her views on stuff. And 2, because I did promise we'd cover these subjects. Again, it's just your brief views on these ones, so you don't have to go into depth. And this is not an IQ test by any means or motion.
That's what you said last time, Kurt.
One of the side effects of war is the effect it has on returning soldiers. And one of the stories that I picked up on this week was that Russian soldiers are bringing back wartime violence back home with them. Because what a lot of people forget, obviously, is that war traumatizes people. Now, imagine that you were a prisoner in a Russian prison and they recruited you to go to the front. You were injured, you've come back. And this is the thing when people talk about like when we talk about remembrance and those types of things and veterans and all the rest of it, they've actually been causing quite a bit of violence back in Russia upon return. And a lot of these guys obviously were named as heroes for going to war. But obviously it's bringing lots of violence, it's bringing lots of problems, mental health issues. And I believe in the UK, we've got the highest group of homeless people are military veterans. Outside of, I think young people are the second biggest group, or it's the other way around. I can't remember, but it's one or the other. In terms of our responsibility, even if you're a pro-war, anti-war, all those types of things, is it possible to, improve the lot of veterans and stuff like that? Do we need to do more as a society? In Russia, obviously, I don't know what they're going to do at all, but obviously people are becoming victims of the violence these men have inflicted, and a lot of it is to do with mental health. Do we, irrelevant of our views on war, do we need to do more for veterans, especially in countries like the UK, in the fact that a lot of them are ended up homeless? And what can we do? Is it just a case of putting more money into it? Is it like with the homeless situation in the UK? We need to start building more houses for these people. I know there's lots of military properties that are empty and stuff like that. How do we get politicians, if we can, to take more notice and really do something about it? Or are we kidding ourselves? And then yeah, I just want to get your quick opinion on that one, if I may. If I can go, I'll go Maxine first.
Right. First of all, is that the problem is that a lot of these wars that are going on are personal vendettas from governments. And the trouble is, it's so easy to start these things because remember, 90% of the time when the wars are going on, they're not sending their children, it's our children. And, and they don't care at the end of the day what happens afterwards. Because, when they come back, that person might not even be in power. And most of these wars, you don't even know, after these veterans, they don't even know what they're fighting about. And most of them probably didn't want to go in the first place, but because they've got these laws where, you've got, what's that thing they have where you're
PTSD.
18? Is it, what's it? What did you say?
PTSD?
No.
Post-traumatic, sorry.
No, the bit where you got to, I think it's Cyprus and that they do it, where they force them like 18, they've got to do military service.
Oh, so subscript is it?
Not conscription, because
Conscription, isn't it? When
you're forced to join the army at 18, yeah. Okay.
Some of them are forced to do it and they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, because they don't, a lot of these people that always are trigger happy, they don't understand that when you go to war, the monstrosities that take place and what you're forced to do. And when you come back, you march about, you get a medal, but your aftercare is not there. And and how can you like, for instance, I've got an uncle who's a soldier, and he's fortunate, but the thing is, he's still got a lot of that mentality in him. Like when he stands really straight. His shoes are like really shiny. You can see your face. He irons his shirt really crisp because these things are basically ingrained into them. The discipline is there, and it's very difficult to basically get them to relax, so to speak. And another way, what kind of jobs are you going to give them after they've been in battle? They've seen combat. What jobs? Because you've got to be able to cater for them. How are you going to do that? There's no money. Like you said, there's no houses for them. And the houses that was there, what happened? Why aren't they there anymore? And all they seem to do is like, the wives are there, and if the husband passes away, they kick the wives and the families out.
That's
so so at the end of the day, it's like it's being a soldier, being a police officer, being a nurse, being a doctor, them kind of things is now devalued. There's no value in them anymore. Where people used to respect those positions, there's no respect anymore. It's all just commercially, artificially pushed out there, and we all march up a day. It's like, during COVID, when the bus drivers were driving up and everyone goes, "Thanks, driver, thanks driver." How many people bother now?
Yeah, I think I agree to a degree, but I think it's more because capitalism's become involved in everything. Like people respect nurse and doctors, but then because of capitalism in a way, it's devalued it in the sense that you can now, if you're a agency nurse, you're getting paid a lot more money than normal nurses, and that frustrates people. And then they find out how much it costs to change a light bulb on the NHS, and that frustrates people.
And you've got to also understand, if I'm standing on the battlefield and I see an American tank, fully kitted, 200 million coming at me, and you've given me some bodged up thing put together because you can't afford to, you don't want to spend the money to give me the right equipment, knowing fully well that I'm not going to make it. Because you ain't giving me the right equipment or the right, uniforms and stuff to go out there.
And do you think? Let me jump to TC quickly. Have you got anything to add to that, TC, or is there?
There's a bloke down the road. I live in sort of in an army town, and we've got a
Oh,
big army
yes.
base up the road, and his job is basically to deal with you can't prevent PTSD because the reason for homelessness would be PTSD, not being able to connect with other people,
Mm,
massive amounts of trauma, and he set up over the last 20 years a whole massive program about getting soldiers before they leave the service. They all have like the opportunity to train as plumbers, project managers, and anything they want to go into. The army provides training for them.
yeah.
So and they provide groups, not self-help groups, but you know what I mean. So they can talk about what's happened to them, and they do provide them with counselling if need be. So things have come a long way. Now, obviously, that will take time to take effect,
Mm,
and it won't happen overnight. And everybody who is homelessness will be homeless. If they're not dealing with those problems. So the steps have been made. Now, I can't tell you if that funding's still up, and I haven't spoken to him in probably about 2 years because we sort of moved from that area, and he was a neighbour. Really interesting bloke, really. But it is there in the service to provide training. They do try and set up their soldiers to have some form of living when they leave the service, and generally it's self-employed. So they'll go into like a trade, or they'll be self-employed where they won't need to basically be in part of a group. Not that they struggle, but it's an option for them. So there are things out there, and it's really easy to be caught up in a, how can I put this? I didn't know about this stuff until he told me about it. And if it's not going to get advertised, and this is part of the problem with all our things here, whether it's to do with poppies or what does poppy stand for, it's about communication, and we're not communicating correctly about what's going on in the army and how many people are homeless. I think the stats in London have changed. I don't think the army is ex personnel is still the highest stat in London at least,
mm,
and that's moved around a bit, but yeah, things are happening now. The only problem is that funding still going to be there? Obviously, our country is probably headed for a recession, and these are all the problems that we're going to have to deal with. I think a recession is probably coming for us unless we have like some kind of wicked trade deal with another group of countries. I'm going to say Europe for shits and
that would be
giggles.
nice.
But it's all about funding. So
Mm,
either we pay more tax. I mean, I'm trying to deal with the soldier after the fact. I can't talk about the wars or stuff like that. These
mm,
things, unfortunately for us, for those individuals, have happened, and all we can talk about is the aftercare. Killing someone is not for I think it's something like 98% of the population is not a normal thing that you can just cope with and go with. And in the army, they're taught to kill a human being, and that's an unnatural thing.
mm.
So dealing with the aftermath, that's why you get PTSD. Dealing with that aftermath is the issue. Uh, you know, what can I say? War's fucking shit. It's not for anyone. I'm sure that are there justified wars? Maybe the Second World War, but I can't give you any opinion on that.
Mm.
We just need to try and deal with the kids that are coming back, and they are kids. Anybody who wishes for a war, because like I remember someone saying that there was possibly, I can't remember, this is before COVID, there's possibly going to be a war in Iraq or somewhere like that. And he was like, yeah, great. And I was like, what are you talking about? Children are going to go over there and die. And I'm talking about kids, like 18, 19-year-olds going out
Mm.
there and being killed and killing, which is, just as bad. You've got to live with that. You've got to live with that. That's, I don't know, mate.
You got
We
to
just got
just
to deal with,
remember.
yeah.
You got to just remember that wars generate money. That's
Oh, yeah,
another
no, you're
thing.
exactly right. They do
And
generate money.
that's why they're always, because isn't it funny, after COVID, we just coming over there, suddenly Russia invaded Ukraine. And, you know, and then all of a sudden they used the Ukraine war to push up prices, wheat, electricity, gas, all of a sudden. Now you barely hear about Ukraine and this war. If they don't remind you, you wouldn't remember it's still going on.
Well,
And
which
it's only
brings
up the
me
road.
to the point now
Cool.
that they just announced, well, Biden has allowed Ukraine to use long-range missiles, and
From
these
Russia.
long-range missiles will enable Ukraine to strike inside Russia for the first time, which, I guess sounds great for the Ukrainians, but it means another escalation in the war,
Well, sounds like a
which,
fair playing field for the Ukrainians.
yeah, but in a war that I might add has escalated in ways that people aren't talking about much. One, in that the Russians are attacking more of Ukraine's infrastructure. Two, in that a lot more foreign troops are entering the
North
fray.
Koreans.
They announced the North Koreans entering the fray, but also they've been hiring soldiers and mercenaries from places like Bangladesh.
Yeah, but that's been happening since the start, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just how I
Well,
don't know. It reminds
why
me
have
when I
they
was a
still
kid, like the
taken
80s.
command from Biden? Look at the state of this man.
I don't think that matters really. It's not. It's
Yeah.
not. It would do with the personnel around them, people at the Pentagon.
Mm.
Yeah. So I mean, Biden can only make the decision, but thankfully he goes on advisors. You know, when the next bloke comes in, we'll see what happens because I think that's going to be a problem.
Almost certainly, but we'll see what happens. It reminds me, I don't know when I was a kid, it reminds me, it's not as terrifying, but during the Cold War, when obviously they used to put warnings out about what to do if a nuclear bomb drops.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it's getting that bit closer to dangerous.
Well, here's the truth. There's nothing you can do.
Mhm. Okay. Right, so I think that's most of the big subjects. I guess I've got a smaller subject,
Ain't small,
but
mate.
no
Ain't
less
small.
depressing, guys. I'm sorry. But heavyweight boxer Mike Tyson, I think he retired as a champion.
No, I thought
Um,
we got beat by what's his name, Evander Holyfield, and then he
he
retired after that,
was, yes, he was,
and
you
then
know,
Lennox Lewis.
probably one of the most well-known boxers when I was growing up, Mike Tyson. He's gotten up to the grand eight. He's only what, 8 years older than
58.
me?
He's 58.
Yeah. 9 years older. Well, 10. Let's say 10. 10 years older than myself, but he's got to that jolly old age after boxing and seems to have most of his wits about him. But for some reason chose to fight Jake Paul in what I could only describe as an exhibition match. I don't know. My only question is to you, what do you think made him like what goes through somebody's head and makes them as mad as
Money,
people are as Jake Paul, and
money.
That's right.
rightfully
That's
so
exactly
mad
right.
at Jake Paul, what went, I don't know, does that has it destroyed his legacy? Is my first question. And my second question is, I don't know. I know the obvious answer is money.
Yeah,
Um,
because you've got to understand, a lot of people cannot deal with the fact that, remember, this man, you must, I mean, I'm sure if he his legacy was on, maybe he could have been worth nearly half a billion by now. And once you're no longer that person and your finance is not correct, you're still trying to live a life that you can no longer afford.
mm,
And you've got to think about all, because what does a lot of athletes, whether they want to admit to it or not, is all these families and girlfriends and wives does you in. Because you think about it, I go out and find myself an, was he NBA player,
mm,
get and end up with a baby with him. He could be paying me like 20, 30,000 a month. What
mm.
baby wants 30,000 a month? Right. And remember, that's okay as long as you've got a contract going. But if you're having to pay 3, 4, 5 of them at a time, you'd be surprised how quick your money goes.
I got you, but for me, this was a farce. Like, it wasn't something that if you were seriously into sport, you'd take seriously on a normal day, right? Let alone when he's fighting what is essentially just a YouTuber.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason the YouTuber's fighting him is because he couldn't actually fight a boxer at his peak. He couldn't fight
Correct.
anybody at their peak.
He,
But yet,
he can't he can't feel
this,
he can't fight an average boxer, Curtis.
yeah.
Tommy Fury, who's a professional boxer, but he's not going to become a heavyweight title. He's not going to be like the heavyweight champion of the world. Beat him up.
Mm. So and it had a lot of sponsorship listed as well. Like a lot of people, I
So
can
how
see
much was the
already.
purse?
Oh mate,
Though I think
millions,
they got a
millions.
million per
More
per
than that. I bet it's like
punch
3,
or
4
whatever
million.
it was. So Tyson walked away with 20 mil, and Jake Paul, I think, walked away with something like 40 million.
Yeah, something
But
stupid.
what makes it even more disturbing is there receipts that were going for 2 million. And I'm like, how, like, I honestly, I know this may be being naive, right? But I honestly don't understand how that happens because this wasn't a serious fight. And no, I don't know anybody who would turn around and say this was a serious fight.
Curtis, it made me
And
sad. It made me sad. It reminded me of the time in 1981 where I watched Ali versus, is it Burbeck? Ali's last fight, and Ali got like beaten up over 10 rounds, and
yeah,
it was sad. And it was sad because obviously it's great. So my dad loved Ali. You know, I only saw like bits of Ali. Like I was 6, but when it happened, loved him. So we watched it, and it was like the sadness. I see the sadness on my face and everybody around it. You know, this is once king of men had like been brought down to this, and I felt the same for Tyson. I felt that basically he was a lion, and he'd been, you know, it's past his prime, and went in there. And I think there's one punch he rocked the lad Jake Paul with, and if he'd followed up, but his legs had gone. You could see he was stumbling around. He couldn't really use his legs, and it was sad.
But you know what? It reminds me of a lot of, you know, like actors, actresses, and all the rest of it. You know, like when they get themselves into the wrong hands of management, and it's like the management wants to squeeze the last drop of juice they can get out of them, even though you know, like you remember back in, I don't know if it's in the 90s or early 2000s, when you had people like Frank Sinatra. You know, he was there in a concert going, and you think
Elvis in the 70s, in his jumpsuit and his belly hanging out.
Why? And you're still putting that, you know, stuffing
Money.
it up with drugs and putting him out there.
Very true.
It's money. It's always money.
And that's understandable, because you can't even retire with dignity now. If you can still walk, you can still go and do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sad. It was just sad. It's just sad. I woke up and I watched it, and I didn't even mean to, and I watched it. It's just sad.
If you even go to, even on our level, you go to Tesco's, Sainsbury's, some places, and you're seeing people in there that should be retired. They shouldn't be in there, but because they're forced back out there because their pensions ain't saying a lot, they've got to go back at, you know, 70, 80s working, and you know they shouldn't be in there.
Yep.
Yeah. But look, at least Tyson walked away with 20 mil. I like, if you're gonna humiliate yourself, walk away with something. And I think he walked away with something.
I would have thought that part of him would have believed that he could have beaten him. And
I think he could have.
I think had he fought him in July when he was meant to, because if you saw the sparring, I think he would have absolutely taken him. But in intervening months, his legs are gone. You know, his leg. You could see he was stumbling around, and he was like trying to get moving, and he couldn't. You know, he was like literally, and I understand that. I'm hitting 50 soon, and bits of me don't work anymore. You know what I mean? And it's mostly doing my shoulders and my knees, but there's bits of me that don't work anymore. Like getting up is like a fight. So I just felt for him, and then this is like the scariest man on the planet. He was the nightmare in the alley. If you got in the ring with him, you expected death. There was a whole game on the NES about him beating up. You know, you couldn't beat him up.
Well, there was a game. There was a fight he had once, one of his first fights, I think it was, and he went up against this Eastern European dude. He was in the ring with him. He punched him 3 times.
Yeah, seconds.
And the guy walked out of the ring and walked out of the stadium. He didn't like. It wasn't like the fight was over. He just walked out.
Yeah, he didn't.
And people were trying to force him back into the ring. People was throwing stuff at him, but he did an interview later, and he was like, "That wasn't a fight to me. I've never been hurt like that before in my life. My jaw was broken, my rib was broken, and that was in the first round, in the first minute. I'm gone. I'm sorry. I'm not here to get I'm not here to get battered.
Yeah.
I was here to have a boxing match. That wasn't a boxing match.
I think ever since his manager Gus, that guy died, he just went down a slippery rope. And then when he got married to that Robin Givens and that he was never. Then he got accused of, was it rape?
Yeah.
That was just like the finish of him.
Yeah. I think it took a few years after that, but I think that was the start of the end for him, unfortunately. And unfortunately, he didn't have the guidance there once Gus
No,
went.
there you go.
Yeah.
And a young guy at that age, he was world champion at 20.
Yeah,
Mm.
20, the youngest.
And
the
then
youngest
remember,
heavyweight champion.
everybody wanted to be his friend.
Of course they
But
did.
even he knew
And-
to stay the hell away from P. Diddy. Now, guys,
Yeah, go on.
thank you. There's an interview with
Yeah,
him, P.
he
Diddy,
stayed away from
and
P. Diddy
he
and
was
ended
like,
up with
P.
what's that
Diddy,
guy
don't
called?
touch me, don't come near me. Which guy?
What's the one with the big hair?
Don
Don
King.
Don King. Which is better, Don King or P. Diddy?
Don King sounds like donkey, but I don't know why. I don't know.
I think Don King wins in this one.
Yeah.
Right, ladies and gents, thank you. Look, Maxine, thank you so much for joining us. Your first show,
Thank you,
you're
Maxine.
breaking the cherry, absolute star. Hopefully you'll join us for some future shows. TC, thank you as always.
There you
Ladies
go.
and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the Global Frequency. We will have more for you as time goes on, and hopefully we'll build up into something nice. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave your comments and questions. Please share, please subscribe, and please tell your mother, your auntie, and your sisters about the show. And we'll be back for more. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the Global Frequency. Thank you.
Come on.
Cha-cha.